now about to present the main attraction of our world-famous show.
Good evening and welcome, everyone, to another episode of Reign Over Me, the Atlanta Reign podcast. As always, I am Shy Guy, he is Norcetto, and we are going to break down all things Atlanta when it comes to the Overwatch League. But first, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. It feels like we were just in here with our good friend Jared a couple days ago. I guess we were, but yeah, I'm ready to get into another week of Overwatch with the Reign. I'm not happy with the last one. Want a new one.
Yeah, what a week it was for the Atlanta Reign, and not in a good way, as they opened up Stage 2 with first a back-breaking reverse sweep by the Boston Uprising, coming back from 2-0. It all started so well, and then it all fell apart, and then it all just went downhill from there for the entire week as the 4-0 from the London Spitfire followed shortly after. So rather than getting into kind of the details of both of those games, as heartbreaking as they were, I want to zoom out, or zoom in a little bit before we zoom out to some big picture stuff, and let's start with kind of the two new additions to the Atlanta Reign, Baby Bay and Fried. And I want to know what you thought of their performances specifically over this first weekend.
I think they. Okay, well, first off, what is this voodoo that Boston's been pulling? But secondly, yeah, I think Baby Bay's doing a good job. I think that there's a little sloppiness happening. I don't think that's necessarily his fault. I think it's just something that would naturally come with being a new player on a team. Some miscommunication, some miscues on his grabs and things like that when playing Zarya. But there has been a lot of highlights and stuff. He has kind of gone on little hot streaks and stuff. You've seen him bust out some actual DPS heroes and stuff. So I'm actually happy with the Baby Bay pickup. I think that it's gonna pay off for us in the long run. Fried was, like we talked about last week, that was a much bigger surprise, mainly because of how well Daco's been doing, and we haven't seen Daco, which is odd. I've heard rumors that maybe he's just sick, but we haven't heard any announcement or anything from the team. I've asked a couple people, haven't heard anything. But as far as his performance, I think Fried's doing fine. I think he is keeping up with everything that is expected of him. I don't think he is really showcasing as much or have as many highlights as Daco has, but I think he's doing fine. It's just his performance really reminds me that Daco's not there more than anything. But I think it's a good pickup. I'm glad we picked him up. I like having that flexibility. But again, just where's Daco?
Yeah, it's strange because when we were looking ahead to this week, we were talking about Dafran leaving and Baby Bay coming in, as if that was going to be kind of a one-to-one thing where we're taking one player out, we're subbing in one player right into his position, and that's all the changes that need to be made to deal with his departure. But in reality, about half of the Reign lineup really got swapped out this week, if you kind of consider that Kodak completely kind of took over the off support duties from Dogman, who was also nowhere to be seen this week.
Now, I have heard that Dogman is actually sick. I have heard that
he was publicly sick on Twitter in the weeks leading up, or in the days leading up to this game. So that absolutely could have been the case. I mean, I know there was talk of him infecting the entire team at one point.
Dogman disease.
So that could very easily be the explanation for why both of these players were out of the lineup in week one. I'm just we haven't heard anything at this point, so it's impossible for us to say what happened. So all I can really talk about is the fact that three of the starters who were there in the playoffs of stage one were not in the lineup for week 1 here, and that compounds the problem that we were already dealing with. If it were just Dafran out and Baby Bay in, I think there's more than enough continuity there, and there's more than enough kind of continuation of the roster that had so much success in stage 1 that they could have carried on, and they could have had a lot of success. But when you are changing half of the team like that, it's incredibly difficult to keep up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a combination of the two different sides of it, which one is filtering in the new blood and trying to get them acclimated to the team environment, synergize with the team, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the players that have been on the team. You have, Inlayer and whatnot that and Kodak, who haven't played as much as Dogman and Dafran did, and they're trying to, get their feet back in the pond, if you will, and really play alongside the team. But it's coming from a completely different angle. They have to re-synergize from a different perspective, and it kind of showed. Now the thing is, though, against Boston, like you were saying, it was a reverse sweep, so they used their Boston had voodoo, but their Boston voodoo to pull off, what is this, 3 reverse sweeps now in a row. But if you watch the first couple of games, it was so heartbreaking, because once we kind of finished the map on Horizon, even on map 3, I was confident. I was still confident up until that first fall on map 3. So like the team can play well together. It's just Boston kind of kicked it up a notch. So I'm confident that they'll be able to pull things together. And I do think that these are good pickups. There's still some questions about, where a couple players are, obviously, and there's still some things to knock into place and get the team on the same page. But if you really look at those first 2 games, or the first 2 maps against Boston, I think there's something to be said about that the team still has potential to play at a high level. It's just they went up against a couple very unique circumstances with these 2 teams this week.
Yeah, and I mean, Boston definitely seems to have that kind of edge right now when they just have some kind of clutch gene at the moment that is allowing them to continue to do this. I mean, this is, like you said, 3 in a row against 3 pretty good teams. But, with that series in particular, Atlanta just had so many chances to close out that series.
Yeah.
It came down to like a miracle self-destruct from RCK on Eichenwald to save Boston there. The Watch Point Gibraltar went to extra rounds, and Atlanta had a shot to win that one as well with a pretty big time bank. And they just got tripped up at those crucial moments, and that hopefully will only get better with time. But it was definitely a rough week for Atlanta, especially when it came to that London game. As far as Baby Bay and Fried go, I am kind of in the same boat as you are. I don't think individually either of them were terrible. Neither of them, I think, were world beaters by any means in week 1. But they were not kind of individually the problem. It wasn't like one of them was throwing the game in any way. Although right. I will say Atlanta has managed to pick up the one Zarya player who makes me more nervous than Dafran when he has a graph.
That's fair. Hey, like some of those eats that London got on Baby Bay's grabs were just insanity. He was playing out of his mind.
Yeah, Fury was
oh my god. Yeah, like you can't put it all on Baby Bay. Like some of those flick grab eats were just next level. I can't even explain it.
No, for sure. It's a two-way street there. And something that I think Baby Bay will definitely get better at as he plays Zarya, because I mean, if you think about it, he's coming from the Shock, where I guarantee you that dude was not getting scrim time playing Zarya for the Shock. I mean, they have Sinatra. They have one of the best Zaryas in the league. They had no reason to ever really give Baby Bay scrim time. So I can't imagine that he's had a ton of high-level experience on Zarya, and it kind of shows right now. But all in all, it wasn't a terrible performance. I think he can slot in as like a slightly worse than Dafran level replacement for him. And if everything else stays the same for Atlanta, then that's still a recipe for at least some level of success.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, yeah, the biggest surprise for me this week, besides of course Boston's miracle, was how good London really looked. A lot of people were expecting them to look like this when they came. It's just start of the season, just because of how good they looked. I mean, they won the the whole thing last year, but they couldn't find it with the initial meta. They were struggling, and that was something we talked about and touched on last week. Is this is with these balance changes and stuff, London is poised to really build up and explode. I even said in the long run they're going to be weak in the beginning, but by the end of the stage they're going to make stage playoffs. Well, they found it, and if London can continue to play like they played, again, Atlanta did have some missteps. There was several places where we lost maps that we could have won, but London was scary, and Boston was Boston. So I'm just saying, I don't think this indicates that we're trashed here by any means. It's nothing we can't bounce back from, and looking forward to this coming week, it is like we can't ask for a better rebuilding week.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely is going to be an important one for Atlanta because, like you said, I mean, the strength of schedule going into this next week is not great. We're up against Valiant and Justice. So I mean that's as good as it gets if you are trying to turn your stage around. But at this point, these are like absolutely must-win games for Atlanta in my mind. If we come out of this week with another loss, it becomes a bit of a crisis at that point, because if you go back to stage one now, this is now 5 out of the last 6 games for Atlanta that have been losses. And obviously there's some good teams in the mix there that and extenuating circumstances. But if you can't get the 2 wins against some of the weakest competition in the league, then we've got serious problems at that point.
Yeah, and what we're talking about, literally 1 win between the 2 teams. Now, I will admit I'm a little worried about Valiant. Like the team with 0 wins, I know. Yeah.
See, I'm a little worried about Washington.
Really?
Yeah, Valiant doesn't scare me at all. I think they still looked like crap last week.
Well, they did, but Valiant is that team that, like, and maybe this is just on me. I'm still ranking them bottom tier, but they haven't changed that much from last season. And last season they actually performed really, really well. And I feel like they're almost a London situation where when they finally figure it out, when it finally clicks, they're actually going to be a little bit scary. I don't know when that's going to happen. I just have this feeling that Valiant's going to be something better than they've shown. But for now, yeah, they look horrible. Washington, I don't know. Like, lukewarm is the most extreme way I can describe how I feel about Washington.
Yeah, to me, they just looked significantly better last week than what we had seen out of them previously. I mean, they took a map off Toronto, which I think is a pretty solid team. They took a map off Chengdu and looked pretty good while playing some DPS picks in the middle of that. Corey had his moment to pop off on Hanzo and Widowmaker. So they worry me a little bit. I still think going into this, you have to reasonably favor Atlanta over both of these teams. But there is potential for things to go wrong. If Atlanta is still having some of the same issues that plagued them last week, then we could be talking about some very close games this time.
I agree, and I hate to say that. I really hate to say, going up against the Valiant and the Justice, that it could be close games, especially after being in the playoffs of stage 1. But I think it's really 2 things that we need to focus on. One is there've been some strange coaching decisions. And when I say strange, I don't say bad for a reason, because we don't have all the information as to why they're happening, why they're taking place. But going into map one, I think it was against the Spitfire with no off tank in, with 3 DPS, and trying that out and not really doing great, and not having that flex potential in case we wanted to run the 3-3, was a little strange. It didn't really work out for us, but maybe there's reasons there. Maybe things like players being sick. Maybe it looks good in scrims. I don't know. But the other one that I think that's more important is that we've talked before about how Atlanta is a very emotional team. They're very, when they have momentum and they're rallying and stuff, it's hard to beat them when they're confident behind themselves. And then when they get shook, it breaks down and they start making mistakes. And I think a lot of those games against Boston that we lost, a lot of the rounds we lost, it was like we got frazzled at the end of a round that they were coming back, and then the team synergy broke down and everybody tried to start making big plays on their own, and they stopped trusting each other, and they stopped trusting the plays they had practiced and everything, and just tried to save the day or tried to make a play, and that's when everything falls apart. I think our coaching staff is really good, and I think that shows when we trust in it. But I think that's the thing, is we got to get over this emotional play where when we start making mistakes, we can't get out of our own heads.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of that and kind of comes down to the fact that we didn't have much of a stable lineup in the last week. In both of those games, there were players shuffling in and out for different maps, which can be like a reasonable strategy. I mean, you bring Inlayer in on the Widow and the May for Anubis, and it actually worked really well against Boston. But to not have like the cohesion and like the constant kind of roster there can make things feel like they're slipping out of your grasp, and makes people, I think, try to do a little bit more than they might be capable of.
Yeah.
It's hard to say exactly what the problems were in week one without being on the inside of things. But this is going to be a very important week for turning things around, because if you look forward to the rest of the stage, there's 2 games against NYXL, which is not going to be great. So I, if I'm being honest, I think Atlanta's chances for stage playoffs are already done. At this point, I think we're kind of playing to salvage this stage. If we can go 3 and 4, so I mean it would be 3 and 2 from this point on, win all of our non-NYXL games, then we're still sitting at 500 after 2 stages. Hopefully things will stabilize at that point and start turning around. But I think that starts this week. They've got to win these 2 games.
Yeah, we got to win both of those. We got to win against the Charge, and I mean, realistically, it's with us still struggling to overcome some things. And you're not going to hear me say this often, but I don't really see us having much of a shot against New York. Our saving grace is that in week 3 we played them on Friday, and on Thursday they have to play against Philly. So maybe they'll prepare more for Philly than us, and we can surprise them. Like any given day, I think it's possible for any team to beat any other team. But obviously pretty much everything is against the Reign winning against the Excelsior. But yeah, I think winning both games this week and against the Charge next week is really what we should be focusing on and what we should be hoping for to get out of this stage. I think it was great to make stage 1 playoffs. I think that we don't need to worry about stage 2 playoffs with those 2 games against New York right now, and just focus on kind of keeping our head above water as we get ready to head into the back half of the season.
Yeah, and these 2 games this week especially, I think, are kind of the best opportunity that you're going to have to start really incorporating these new pickups into the team. Like, this is the time where you can experiment a little bit, perhaps. You can try some different lineup looks and probably still come away with the wins that you need. But I really don't want to see Atlanta coming out, getting popped right off the bat, and then panicking again. Like that's the thing that we can't afford to let happen here. They need to be able to maintain their composure if things do start to get a little bit dicey. Hopefully this is the week for the turnaround to start, because it's not been an exceptional last few weeks for Atlanta after what was a really impressive start.
Yeah, agreed. Like it was, it's one of those things where a lot of the other teams have finally. It took them a few weeks to find their own play style and their own groove. But some teams more than others. Like you look at the Chengdu Hunters and the team they were in the opening couple weeks, where people were kind of laughing at them, like, what is this team doing? And now they're just terrifying. But yeah, I think Atlanta started out strong and hasn't necessarily had to grow as much as a lot of other teams, and I think now it has caught up to them in a lot of ways, especially with these new acquisitions. But I always go back to it. I think we do have the talent. I think we do. There's a lot of thought put into how the team will operate. But I was going to ask you with the players that we have right now. I still personally think we will be signing another maybe projectile DPS backup. But for who we have right now, who is your starting six? Like if we're going in, up to you whether or not you think we're going to play 3-3, whether you think we're going to flex over to a 2-2-2 or something like that. But who is your starting six of the players we have right now?
Well, for me, I think you've got to stick with the core that we had from stage one for the most part, which to me, if we're looking at, I think 4 players that like need to be in the lineup all the time, it's going to be Popo, Masa, Erster, and Daco. And I think those 4 kind of need to be there no matter what. We'll see if that happens in this stage, but the hit scan DPS slot can be switched around, I think, a little bit depending on the map. I think you probably want Baby Bay there as your long-term option in that role, at least given the players that you have right now. Inlair is going to be playable on certain maps. I actually like what they've done with him on Anubis for the most part in terms of the strategies that he brings to the table. But I don't think he's your like everyday starter.
Yeah.
And then the flex support position is so hard for me to say. I've really enjoyed Dogman, and I think he's been one of the vocal leaders of this team so far. So that would probably be my pick there. But if the coaching staff sees something that they think Kodak is going to improve this team by his presence, then I'm all for that. I don't think it's kind of a clear choice between the two.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. I think in general, kind of I agree with what you're saying, just the core that we had last year and literally what people were saying, drop in Baby Bay when we dropped out Dafran is kind of the ideal thing to swap. And Lair, again, he did big performances on, Busan and Anubis, like he said, with May. Yeah, being able to swap him in is a good call, but I think Baby Bay should be the go-to. I wish we just had a little bit more information about the Dogman again. He's been a little bit vocal, but where's Daco? He hasn't really been on. It's funny, he hasn't really been on social media. Someone pointed out on Reddit, and someone thought that like the last thing he said was at the end of March, and someone said, no, when Baby Bay got signed, he called him a noob, and that was the last thing that Daco has said on social media is calling Baby Bay a noob.
Maybe he's getting benched for toxicity to his new teammates for cyberbullying them.
That was actually something I considered, was that Dogman came out after the Boston game and said that the team played like trash, and he was just if you looked into at the context, you could tell he was just kind of very frustrated and saying like, we played horribly, we'll have to play better, blah 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 blah. But it very much seemed, if you looked at it with a little bit of a skewed perspective, that he was just trashing his team, like we suck, like I can't believe we're this bad, like I blah blah blah. And a lot of people jumped on that, and I'm wondering if he had to come out and apologize, and I'm wondering if there was an internal like, you don't need to say stuff like that, you're being benched. I don't think so. I don't think that's as egregious of something to have happened to cause that kind of reaction, but again, I don't know. Like, especially with us not hearing anything about Daco, I don't know. I just question.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. Dogman has always been the type of player who is incredibly hard on himself and by proxy, I guess, his team.
Yeah.
Like he, even when Atlanta was doing really well in stage one, he was always kind of very hard on himself and criticizing his own play. So this is not anything really new from him, although it's kind of the first time he's lashed out to the wider team as a whole. And I mean, I don't think he was wrong in his assessment there. They did not play well in the reverse sweep part of the series against Boston. So I if he is getting benched for that, I don't think I really like that decision, because that is the attitude I kind of want my players to have after they get beat like that.
Yeah,
I don't want him to be satisfied after that loss. He really shouldn't be. And there's a fine line to walk there between self-criticism and your negativity kind of affecting the rest of the team, and creating an environment that's not great for the team as a whole. So obviously, if there's something internal going on there, they know way better than we do. I hope that's not the case.
Yeah.
Because that's just the last thing that a team needs right now.
And again, I don't think it is. I really don't get that feeling. It's one of those just trying to explore the options. But just to reiterate, I honestly don't believe that's the case.
Yeah.
Especially with him coming out, essentially hosting the the Cribs video for the Atlanta team house.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
That was sick. That place is absolutely insane. One of the nicest houses. Yeah. One of the nicest houses I have ever seen.
I had not seen the graphics they had for the game room and the VOD review room.
Oh yeah.
Like I had seen some pictures and some internals of the house and everything, and the living room before they put all those graphics up, and it looked like they were playing in the living room of a big freaking house. But that really makes it look like a really high class like gaming area. That's so cool what they've done to the place.
Yeah, that place is so sick. I'm insanely jealous of anyone who gets to live there. Yeah, these all players, at least the ones who have team houses like that, are living the good life right now for sure.
Oh, and the big reveal in this video was Chef Alex, the team chef for the Atlanta Reign. I'm big on the chef meta. As we know, the top player in the chef meta is Chef Heidi with the Philadelphia Fusion. With our fledgling rivalry that we have going, I would love to get some Iron Chef action going up between the two.
Oh, that would just be some fantastic content. You could have the players like judge them.
Oh, that would be so good.
That would be incredible. I would love to see that at some point. So if anyone from the Reign is listening, get on that. Like, make that happen, because you would get so much like good publicity from that. Everybody on like the competitive Overwatch subreddit would eat that up.
Oh yeah, and I actually tweeted that out to them in response to the video and tagged Chef Heidi, and she responded with a panda cooking gif. It's very strange, but I'm going to take that as her being on board. So we just need to get Chef Alex on board, and we'll get rolling with it.
For sure. There is, one last thing that I wanted to talk about, and that was one of, I think, the better kind of signs of life from the Reign last week, and that was their willingness to kind of play around with the meta a little bit. Like they were very proactive, I thought, about, they took advantage of the new hero a few times, having Erster pick that up. They were playing some different compositions, some triple DPS. They broke out the Bastion on Eichenwald at one point. So they are trying different things, and if you are in a slump like this, that's the attitude that I want my team to have. So I'm happy with that part of it, and hopefully that will start to yield some results.
Yeah, that's a good point, and something that a lot of people were pointing out that it was probably just going to be more goats, which I don't think anyone really wanted. And the willingness of teams to play around is big, and that's going to be something that comes up every stage. Is the league has kind of said a couple times that they want to kind of make balance changes between the stages, kind of line those up, and probably not something as big as we just had, but we will probably have more slight balance changes going into the second half of the season, and the ability for teams to not only identify what the meta is going to be, but adapt their strategy and adapt their play style around it is going to be very big. And this is the first time that a lot of teams are having to deal with that. And maybe some teams saw it coming early and were more in tune with it, and some teams may be struggling with it. So it definitely looked to me like while we were trying things, especially against Boston, they were having more success in trying things, even though we were. So yeah, maybe just a little bit more time playing around with a new hero will yield some interesting results. Who knows? Maybe we'll have a crazy week and beat New York next week. Let's not talk about it. Let's just move on.
Yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. If we can come out 2-0 this week, look pretty strong again, then you'll start to you'll take my hopes from 0% chance to maybe we got a 5 or 10% chance
It's
of
my
taking that
optimism
one.
creeping up.
Yeah,
I gotta let it out a little bit.
I'll leave the door open, but let's take care of business this week before we start talking upsets.
Yeah, fair. But yeah, well, let's not have any upsets this week. We have literally, let's not give the Justice their second win, or God forbid, the Valiant their first.
No one wants to be the first win for anybody. I don't care how good Valiant were last year, how talented a team they are. No one wants to be the first team to lose to them.
That's true. And props to Boston for after trading a player and getting RCK in to perform so well, because we weren't the only ones dealing with roster adjustments. They swapped out some players too, so good on them. But yeah, going into this week, let's call it. What do you think for the Valiant game?
I'm gonna go 3-1 for the Valiant game. I still think Atlanta, for all the problems that came out last week, Valiant still looked like a dumpster fire. It was still very, very rough. I mean, yes, they were playing a really good team. They got 4-0'd by the Shock, but they still looked lost. So I can't, until it happens. There's no way I would ever predict Valiant taking a win. So yeah, that's where my head's at.
I'm actually going to agree with you. I think, especially, I don't think Valiant is. I don't think it's their time to show up to play yet. I think they still have some building to do. So I think that one map loss is going to come more from us still having a little bit of a shaken confidence more than anything. But no, I do think this will be the game where Atlanta kind of refines its footing, hopefully. And yeah, I agree with you. I think a 3-1. And I think that one loss is going to come either in map 1 or map 2.
Yeah, I would definitely lean in that direction right now. But what about the Justice? This is the game that probably has me more worried. I think there's a little bit more kind of, I guess, pop off potential from Washington if Corey comes in and just continues to look like a sniping wizard. Then there's something there. So what are you thinking about this one?
I'm just not, I'm not worried about the Justice at all, really. Like we talked about it earlier, you're not really worried about the Valiant. I'm not really worried about the Justice. This game, to me, is going to come down to how we're doing, how confident we are, and it's going to come down to that Valiant game. If we go in and we kind of maybe struggle in the beginning and then clean up the Valiant and do really well the rest of the game, I think we're going to come in and stomp the Justice. I think we're going to come in and 4-0 the Washington Justice. If we struggle and maybe even take it to a map 5 against the Valiant, I think this Justice game could be a little closer. I've started to kind of get more behind the idea of the team riding those waves of confidence, and I think that I do think we'll beat the Valiant, though. So I think we're just going to stomp the Justice with a 4-0.
Okay, I'm kind of going in the other direction. I'm definitely not going to be picking Justice to win this game. I think that would be insane. At this point in the season, they've still got one win. Like let's be honest, they beat Florida, and that is it so far. Until something changes there, I can't pick them over a team that is at least in the middle of the pack. So I do think this will be close. So with gun to my head, I'm going to go 3-2 Atlanta. I really do think there is a possibility of this being a nail biter. But like you said, I think the confidence means a lot to this Atlanta team. We saw it last week. They kind of crumbled after losing that reverse sweep. And, if they can get their footing back with Valiant, I think they'll be able to carry that through. But it will be a close game in my mind.
Yeah, and honestly, if that happens, it's not going to surprise me that much. There's even pretty much all the games we've played, even the ones that we've ended up winning pretty convincingly, come down to one or two fights is all it really comes down to. And when you have one player like Corey able to go on a tear, that can win that one fight. That can win that one clutch affair that ends up taking the map, that ends up taking the game, So while I do think it's going to be a stomp, I'm not putting it past anyone. The teams exist in tiers for sure. Like if you were to put a Valiant or a Justice up against the New York Excelsior, I'd scoff and tell you, of course, New York's going to win. But there's always that little voice in the back of your head going, but I believe that they might not if the circumstances line up. So yeah, while I could see this going to a map 5, God, I hope not.
Yeah, I map 5s really make me nervous at this point.
Oh God, yeah,
it's not great, and at least we don't have to worry about Boston this time around. So no magic there, but hopefully this will be the start of a little bit of a turnaround, a reversal of fortunes for Atlanta going into this week. But I think that is gonna really do it for us here this week. At Rain Over Me.
I will say, I wanted to point out before we go that I happened to be in Atlanta this week for the Boston watch party, and man, those things they're kicking those up. Like this one was straight up sponsored by Coca-Cola, open bar, free food truck from the varsity. Ooh. Like everything was free. There's free red and white Coke edition swag. And this wasn't Coke sponsoring the team sponsoring the watch party. This was Coke straight reaching out to the local watch party and saying we should do work together because man, that sponsorship is legit. They want to help people out. But yeah, anyone local listening to this, definitely hit up those watch parties because they're legit.
Yeah, they definitely seem like a good time, and all the folks that are involved in putting those on are doing God's work right now.
Oh yeah, the people in I'm from out of state, right over the border into Alabama, so I'm not I don't have my feet on the ground to help them out, but the guys that are making those things happen are doing so much work, and I can't really thank them anymore for what they're doing. I can't thank them enough, rather. So yeah, keep on keeping on, and if you guys can make it, and have just maybe chosen not to, haven't made the time, make the time. It's a bunch of really cool people, cosplayers, and yeah, as far as this last one, free swag, drinks, and food.
Can't ask for any more than that. All right, well, thank you for joining us here this week. It's maybe not been the most fun week for an Atlanta Reign fan, but things are hopefully looking up going into this week, and we will catch you guys on the other side of it.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a good week. It's going to be a big one. Be there, support the boys, and let it rain.
Play Daco.
I want to tell you another one.
Really? Yes. Really? Yes. Yes.
I want to play you another one.
Really?